Hey, Discernment listeners, couples therapy. Let's watch.
2 weeks ago, Molly and Josh had like an interesting, dramatic turn. It was like an outburst from her of impatience, like real deep impatience with him and vicariously with me. And they canceled the next session.
Okay, so to catch you up, this is 2 weeks later after the previous session, and Orna is telling her advisor, her consultant. By the way, in an earlier episode, I was kind of criticizing them for having a consultation meeting outside, which, come to think of it, is sort of ridiculous because this is on television. So for them to be in public overheard, that doesn't matter, right? I guess I would only criticize it for modeling what you shouldn't do as a therapist. It could, one, give the wrong guidance to therapists, and more therapists are losing their boundaries, with these sorts of things. I don't know if it's more and more, but I have seen things. But it could also send a message to the public that we have consultation outside where people can hear and we use their names, which should not be done. But anyway, so she is saying 2 weeks ago we had that session, and it was that difficult, tense session. And I was worried about the rupture possibility between Molly and Orna. And I was concerned that there wasn't any attention from Orna to that rupture that was seemingly happening. And one could argue that it's the right approach what Orna was doing. I don't know, but I was just saying for my style, I would have, at my best, which I'm not always at my best, but I would have noticed the rupture and I would have tried to address it. It wouldn't mean that I would just please Molly all the time and say, you're right. I would just provide some direct warmth and understanding and acknowledgement of it, maybe apologize, even though I wouldn't be saying, I apologize for the therapy, because maybe I stand by my therapy, but I could apologize for maybe going too fast or giving the wrong impression, that kind of thing, which, I think actually happened, because I think Molly was concluding that she was being beat up and that Josh was not being asked to do anything, or at least not as much as Molly was, which I think is a rational conclusion. We've only seen little bits. Now, that might be the right thing to do, and if I were the therapist and I was doing that, then I would stand by that, but I would still acknowledge, yeah, I get it, and that is kind of what I've been doing. I have been asking more of you, and maybe that's not the right thing to do, but I think that it is, and here's why, that kind of, anyway. So then we hear that they canceled the next appointment, which we would assume Molly was the one who canceled. Who knows? I mean, I suppose he could have canceled it, Josh, but in all likelihood, he would have done it because he was trying to please Molly, So that's not a good sign. This is the last episode in this series, this season. It's season 3A, whatever that means, but it's the last episode. So there's a chance that we'll never see them again, but there's also a chance that there will be another session.
With a pretend excuse or not even?
Nope, not a pretend excuse at all. They suddenly got freaked out. You know how there's that moment in therapy where you hit like a real spot and suddenly you decide, I don't need therapy anymore?
Absolutely.
I'm not encouraged by this. So now we're only seeing bits and pieces of the consultation, but it's a real big pet peeve of mine for therapists, and I've done it too, when we might have done something wrong as a therapist, not horrific, not against the law or a horrible thing, but we didn't do enough, or we did too little, or we did too much, or we didn't read the situation quite right, or something, and instead of raising those questions and wondering, maybe I went too fast, or maybe I should have noticed the rupture, or I wonder what rupture there was there. What could I learn from that, or what could I do in the future with this couple to help them with this without changing my treatment plan or my style, but I wonder if I made a mistake. Instead of asking that question, therapists will blame the client, and they will do so in this clinical language that sounds clinical and right and justified. And that's kind of what Orna's doing. It's a very common thing. And one of the key elements of competency is humility. as a therapist. We have tremendous power. We can declare that Molly is wrong in a very clinical way. We can declare that she is dropping out of therapy because they hit the real point of therapy and they got scared and they decided to drop out of therapy. It's their fault. She's not saying directly it's her fault, but she's certainly not saying that she might have contributed to it at all. You know what I mean? Now, she wouldn't necessarily know because they haven't had a conversation with the client as to what happened there. But at the very least, in the conversation should be those kinds of questions. I wonder if I missed something. I wonder if I could have done this. I wonder if I misinterpreted. I wonder if she was right, that I was focusing too much on her. We make mistakes. We can't know everything at all times. Being in a relationship with someone, even a therapeutic relationship, means things get messy. And maybe there was no right answer. Maybe there was no exact best way to do it. And I chose one way and it was a good way, but it didn't address everything. And that happens because reality is that things aren't clean and there isn't always an answer for every problem. But part of, them dropping out of therapy, I contributed to it because I chose that when I probably should have chose that other thing. Anyway, those are the questions. And now that can go too far where therapists will blame themselves and beat themselves up. And we don't want to do that, of course. But so what's happening right now is it's a huge pet peeve of mine. And as a supervisor, I try to instill a culture with my supervisees, especially in a group format, of asking these questions and me leading the way, me saying, this happened to me once and here's where I went wrong, and to create a culture of elevating and privileging those people who actually ask these questions of themselves. And it's not an admission of incompetence or of unethical behavior. It's just good therapeutic practice to be self-reflective.
There's that moment in therapy where you hit like a real spot and suddenly you decide, I don't need therapy anymore.
Absolutely.
So they got terrified.
Right. I wonder if, in part, it was because the amount of intensity and exhaustion and truth that occurred in that session was a breakthrough.
All right, just chiming in here, the rest of this video will be for members of the YouTube channel. So if you want to see this whole video and all the other videos in this series and all the other member-exclusive videos, become a member by clicking the join button, only if you want to and only if you can afford to. But if you can't, then today now is goodbye until tomorrow or whenever the next video is. And please take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.